Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Friendly Academy. Now in this video, let's see how to use GitHub Actions to deploy your serverless applications to AWS platform. Now GitHub Actions is a CI/CD platform from GitHub, and if your code is in GitHub, then you can easily use GitHub Actions to deploy your application to wherever you want. Now in our case, we are going to use AWS, but it's not limited to that. You can define your configuration or the build workflows in YAML, and GitHub will execute that code configuration step by step. So in that case, you can deploy to Azure, Kubernetes, wherever really you want to deploy through GitHub Actions. Before we start with the implementation, there's one thing I want to discuss with you. That is, if you are developing serverless applications on AWS or any other applications, really containerized applications or so, the main AWS service that facilitates CI/CD is Code Pipeline. Code Pipeline is the umbrella service, and underneath that we have Code Build, Code Commit, Code Deploy, and these other services that helps us to create our continuous delivery pipelines. But before we start using them, we have to configure it. Either we have to use AWS console to click and create these workflows by hand, or else we can use infrastructure as code like CDK pipelines to create our continuous delivery pipelines, and then only we can start using them. But with GitHub Actions, if your code is on GitHub, you can just write your build step in a YAML configuration, have it at the root level in your code repository, and then GitHub will pick it up and start deploying application. So you don't have to worry about creating pipelines for your applications or so anything. GitHub will take care of that. So it's a very convenient way of creating your CI/CD pipeline, and I think that's one of the very good reason why most of the startups in particular use GitHub Actions to automate their deployment workflows. So without any further ado, let's start with our implementation.
Alright guys, so when you search GitHub Actions on Google, you should find the first URL, the features of GitHub Actions, that will take you to the landing page of GitHub Actions. Now, as I previously mentioned, GitHub Actions automate your workflows with the CI/CD pipelines, and that is directly integrated with the code in your GitHub. So if we scroll down a little bit, in GitHub Actions, we can create workflows, and these workflows can be run in response to different GitHub events. And GitHub Actions also support different runtime, Linux, Mac OS, Windows, so you can select which runtime do you want to execute your pipeline code. And there are a bunch of languages it supports at the moment: Node.js, Python, Java, Ruby, Go, Rust, and so many other languages. And if you further scroll down, you can find the community powered workflows section. Now this is really useful because there are a lot of workflows that are already created by community and make available for you. So you can easily go to GitHub Marketplace. We will go there shortly, and find something that is interested to you. So in our case, we are going to find serverless Lambda related workflow. I'll show you in a bit. So from our pipeline or from GitHub pipeline, we can deploy to ECR, Elastic Container Registry. So if we are deploying a Docker image, or we can deploy to Kubernetes, AWS Lambda. There are a lot of other third-party services or cloud providers that we can directly connect from GitHub Actions. So here's something important, the pricing aspects of it. So if you have a public repository, it is free. And for private repositories, in the free version, 2000 minutes per month is free. And in the pro version, 3000 minutes are free, and so on and so forth. All right, so this is a quick introduction to GitHub Action. Now let's go to documentation, and there we can go to this quick start guide, and that will show you the initial steps that is required for us to start using GitHub Actions. So in order to use GitHub Actions, what we only need is a GitHub repository. But right now we don't have a GitHub repository, but I have the code available to you in the courses resources section. If you open the lesson, then you should find the code there. Just download it and first open it in your Visual Studio Code or any of your code editor. Now here I've opened the code in Visual Studio Code, and you can also do so. Just download it and then extract the zip file and open that folder using Visual Studio Code or any other code editor. Now this code is related to our Nodes API backend. And in this code, we have our API, CRUD operations, the updating node, creating node, deleting, getting all nodes, and so on. We are using this particular plugin called Serverless IAM role per function so that we can provide permission function level. So we don't have to provide IAM credentials globally, but we can add it to the individual functions. And also we have this resources.yaml file that includes different resources that we configured or provisioned with CloudFormation. Now this is the infrastructure as code in YAML. So we have this nodes table, DynamoDB table, and Cognito user pool, Cognito user pool web client, Cognito user pool domain, and so on and so forth. So there are a bunch of resources that is getting provisioned when we do serverless deploy. So let's see what we are going to do. I mean, obviously we can use SLS deploy or serverless deploy to deploy our changes. But we want to automate this as much as possible. Particularly when we are working with a team, it is important to automate this deployment pipeline. So you can automate deployment to your test environments, production environments, and so on and so forth. So that's where GitHub Actions really comes in handy. So right now our code is not in GitHub, but in order to use GitHub Actions, we need to have our code in GitHub. Okay, so let's go to GitHub and I'll go ahead and create a new repository. So I'll click here and click new repository, and let's call it SLS GitHub Actions demo. And I'll set it as a public repository. So GitHub Actions would be free for me, all the execution time. And then I'll go ahead and click create repository. And now I can use this command to push my code to this particular repository. So let's use these commands. First, I will initialize a Git repository locally. So let's do that. Right now, I don't have a GitHub or Git repository locally. So let's initialize it, Git init. Okay. And then I will add all the code. Let's commit it with a commit message called initial commit. And then I will create a branch called main. So let's create that too. And after that, we will add this repository or the GitHub repository as our remote repository. So I will add it as a remote. So now if I do git remote -v, I should see my origin is set to that repository URL. And finally, we are ready to push it. So let's push the code, git push -u origin main. Okay, so it is now properly synchronized. So let me do a refresh. Now I can see all my code in the GitHub repository. Great. Now I can use GitHub Actions. So the first step, let me go to the quick start of GitHub Actions. So the first step is to create .github folder, and in that we have to create this workflows folder or the directory. So let me go to my code, and in the top level or the root level, I'll create a folder called GitHub, and then I'll create a subfolder called workflows. Now inside this workflows folder, I can add the configuration to build my project or the build my code. So I'll go to quick starts one more time. I can create a file. I mean, this file name could be anything. So I'll just use the same name they suggest here. New file, paste it. So GitHub Actions demo.url or the demo.yaml rather. And here I will just copy this YAML code and paste it here. Now this is a sample workflow configuration. First we can add a name. Now this is optional. You can add a name to your workflow, and then you can decide on which event should we trigger this workflow. So here in this case, when we push the code to this GitHub repository, the workflow will execute. So when the code is pushed, it will start executing the jobs. So you can define one or more jobs. So here when we are defining a jobs, we have to define where is it going to run. Are we going to use Ubuntu, macOS, Linux? In this case, we are using Ubuntu. And then I can run my build steps. So in this case, we are echoing some statements. But this is not the one that we are going to use to build our serverless project, because here we need to use serverless CLI to deploy our infrastructure to AWS. So let's find a better workflow. So where can I find a better workflow examples? We can go to GitHub Marketplace. I'll select the link or click on the link github.com/marketplace. And then I can start searching for the workflows that I need. So in our case, I need AWS Serverless workflow. So let's just search for serverless and see if there's anything matching. And here we go. I see an GitHub workflow action that is published by Serverless Incorporation itself. So it says wrap serverless framework to enable common serverless commands. And it has 388 stars. So let me select this one and have a look. So here under usage section, there's an example workflow particularly targeting for serverless version 3. Now if you use different versions of serverless, for example serverless version 1 or 2, there are small changes we need to do. I'll show you, because right now we use serverless version 2. So let me copy over this piece of code, the configuration, and let's replace it. Replace. So let's have a look. First, we can give it a name, deploy master branch, or we can call it deploy nodes API. So that's our workflow name. And this workflow will trigger whenever we push the main branch, because we create a main branch, not the master branch. So let's change it to main. That is fine now. Then we can define the jobs, or what are we going to run. So there is one of the jobs called deploy. So I'll change it to production deployment, and later we'll add dev deployment as well. Can give it a name. I'll call it production deployment, and we'll use Ubuntu latest to run our workflow. And the strategy in metrics, so we can define the node version. So right now the node version that we use in serverless YAML is 14.x. So let's use 14.x. So now let's have a look at the build steps. So the first step is to check out the code, and we are using GitHub Actions to check out the code. So this is fine. So it will check out the entire code, and then we need to use Node.js. So we will use Node.js, the node version, and this node version 14.x, it includes in this particular action.setup node at v3. So if we quickly do a search, let me copy this and let's search for this. So we have this action setup node, GitHub Actions documentation, and here this checkout version 3, it supports major versions like 14, 16 and 18. So it's fine. And after that, we need to run npm install, and we are using npm CI in this case. npm CI is similar to npm install, but it's not going to change your package-log file, which is fine. And then we will do serverless deploy. Now, in order to do serverless deploy, we are using this particular GitHub action from serverless. So it is called serverless/GitHub action at version 3.1. But we use serverless version 2 here, so we probably have to change this version. So let's have a look at their documentation quickly. And this is the serverless GitHub action documentation. And it says if we use serverless version v1 or v2, then we can use the corresponding version here. So let's use this instead of v3. So I'll replace it with v2. Now, in order to run serverless deploy, we should provide GitHub workflow some permission, because this serverless deploy is going to provision some AWS resources, including Lambda functions, API gateway, DynamoDB table, and so on and so forth. So we have to configure some credentials, and we are going to add them to the GitHub workflow environment. And for that, we can use this section. So we essentially need to pass the access key ID and the secret access key of a IAM user. In this case, we'll create IAM user who only have programmatic access. I'll show you how to do that. And then associate the access key ID and the secret access key. So let's remove these two lines of code and uncomment these two. So here we are not hard coding the access key IDs and secret access key, but we will use GitHub secrets to store these ones as environment variables. So let's go to GitHub, and I'll go to my repository which I just created, and there we have this settings section. So I'll go to settings, and in settings I can see this secret section. So I'll click here, and underneath that I have actions. So this is the GitHub Actions secrets. Now there are two places where we can configure secrets: the environment section and the repository secrets. Let's create some environment secrets. Now in this case, we can create different environments. For example, production environment, dev environment, testing environment, and so on, and associate environment specific secrets. So these secrets key names may be same, but the values may be different. So let's make use of environment, because I'll show you how can you configure your GitHub workflows for different environments. So here, in order to create environment secrets, I'll click on this link, manage your environments, and add environment secrets. And here I can start creating a new environment. So let's create new environment, and I'll call it production. So this is our production environment. Click configure environment. And here I can further protect my environment. Like I can require some reviewer to give the approvals. I can add a wait timer and so on. But I'm not going to add any of these protections. You can explore by yourself. What I will be adding is these environment secrets. So these secrets are accessible only by GitHub Actions in the context of this environment. I'll show you how to set the context in our GitHub Action configuration too. But before that, let's click Add Secret, and let's give it a name. So in this case, the environment variable that we are accessing, the name is AWS Access Key ID. So let's add that. And here I need to add the value. But before that, I need to create a programmatic user in AWS. So let's go ahead and create. I'll go to AWS console first. All right, so I logged into AWS console, and then I'll go to IAM, or Identity and Access Management. Let's go ahead and create a user. So I'll go to users section, click add user, and I'll call this user maybe GitHub CI user. And I'll add only the programmatic access, set the permission, and I'll add an existing policy directly. This user's credentials should be able to provision the resources for our AWS serverless stack. So in our case, we are supposed to deploy DynamoDB tables, cognitive user pool, web client, so on and so forth, including the Lambda functions and API gateways and so on. So I'll add administrator access in this case. Click Next Tags, Review, and create the user. So now I see the access key ID and the secret access key. I'll copy the access key ID and let's go back to our environment section and then paste this access key ID and add the secret. So the secret is now added. Good. And I'll click Add Secret again. So this time I need to associate the AWS secret access key value. So I'll edit the name and the value. I'll copy it off camera and then come back to the environment section again, paste the value. After pasting the value, I'll add the secret. I'm not going to show that right now. All right, so I just added both the access key ID and the secret access key for our production environment. Now, if we go back to the secret sections, to the actions, I should see two environment secrets, and this environment is named as production. Good. So how can we refer this environment in our GitHub Actions configuration? So in this case, we need to define another attribute or the key called environment. And I can add the name of the environment. Make sure you spell it correctly, production. And also I can add an optional URL. So let's say this is our production application endpoint, and now we just added it, test1 test.com. So this will show it in GitHub Actions, so we can easily navigate to it. So when we set the environment like so, and when we are trying to access the environment variable, it will always get it from the environment that we have defined. So in this case, from the production environment. So it will fetch the secret access key and the access key ID from that environment. All right. Then there's one additional thing we need to do. In the serverless.yaml file, we are also using Serverless Plugin. So if I scroll down, you should see there's this plugin section, and there we use Serverless IAM role per function. Now, if we look at our package JSON, we've added to the dev dependencies. So we need to particularly install this plugin, otherwise it won't work. But this is very easy. And in fact, there's an example in the Serverless GitHub action for this. So in the Serverless GitHub Actions documentation, if you scroll down a little bit, usage with Serverless plugins, they have particularly added a piece of configuration to install the plugin and then deploy. So we are going to replace it with our current Serverless Deploy command. So let me just copy this and then go to the GitHub Action configuration. So right now we have this section saying Serverless Deploy as the name and using this particular GitHub action. We're going to replace this. I'll just replace this with the one I just copied. And it says now install plugin and deploy. And here also we are using Serverless GitHub action, not version 3, but version 2, since we use Serverless version 2. But we have another additional configuration. There we will install the plugin, and we need to replace the plugin name here. So let's copy it from here. All right, and after that it will do Serverless Deploy. And we can further add the stage 2. So in this case, I'll add a different stage, -- stage. let's call it production. So this is our stage. Now this looks okay. So let's add the code. Let's do git status. I can see there are some code got modified. So let's do git add -a. It will add everything. And I'll add a commit message, GitHub action configuration. And then we'll push it to origin main. If I check my remotes right now, I have origin. And let's do git push origin main, because we are particularly looking at the main branch changes. So it's now pushed. So let's go to the GitHub repository. And I can see the code is committed. And there's a yellow color label or the circle that indicates the GitHub action workflow is running. So let's click on here. And I'll select this detail section that will take me to this GitHub Actions tab. And here we go. Our workflow is now running. Let's see if we encounter any errors. So right now the setup part is complete. Now it is building the GitHub Action version 2 from Serverless. And after that it will check out the code and install Node.js 14.x. Run npm CI and finally install the plugin and deploy it. Let's see if we get all these steps successful. So here the serverless version 2.72 is installed. Now checking out the code. So it's using 14.x. Now it's installing an plugin and doing the deployment. You can see it is actually running Serverless Deploy right now. Serverless plugin installation is complete. It is successfully installed it. Well, we got an error. Let's see. I'll open that up again. Well, I got an error. It says you have attempted to create more buckets than allowed. Now, this is a problem in my AWS account. I think I have too many S3 buckets than the soft limit. So I will go ahead and remove some of these buckets and come back. All right. So I removed some of the S3 buckets and click here so that it ran the same job again. Now it is successful. Now you can see all the steps are now succeeded. And if I particularly go into this section, which is installing plugin and deploy, I can see the logs from Serverless Deploy, where I created the stack and validated the stack. And finally, once it completes, it spit out all these endpoints. Like this is the post endpoint, the API gateway endpoint, and the Lambda function names, and so on and so forth. So let's check whether these are now available in AWS. So I'll just copy this function name, nodes API-production-authorizer. I'll go to the AWS account and I'll go to the Lambda function in West East 1. So right now I'm in the Lambda console and let me search for that particular function. Hit enter. Here we go. This is our function. Now it is deployed. So this is deployed through GitHub Actions. Not only that, but also we have some resources as well in terms of DynamoDB. So if I go to resource.yaml file, we have this nodes table, cognitive user pool web client, and other resources. So let's check for this nodes table. So the table name goes as nodes dash the stage name. In this case, it is production. So we should see a DynamoDB table called nodes dash production. So let's check that. I'll go to DynamoDB. I'll go to the table section. And then I see this nodes dash production table. So it seems like all the resources are now provisioned, as well as our API gateway and Lambda functions are also deployed.